Hello and welcome back to the Star Trek Convention. I am Heather Ferris, your unofficial host for STLB 2019, and I am joined by Fred and Rocky, and we are here to bring you the Doctors Panels. Now this is a little different because we are actually having a new panel that you have never seen before. They've never gone the doctors together before, so go check it out, watch it, and then join us after for our commentary. We will see you soon.
You know, John, do you know Gates?
I brought a magazine because I don't think anybody's going to want to talk to me.
John, do you know Gates? Yes, I know Gates. I know all these people. Okay, Sid, do you know Bob?
No one introduced me to all the green ladies, though.
You know, we can do that later. I mean, you know.
We operate on each other all the time.
Well, Hal, first of all, you know, like when you look back on like the late 90s, there was so much activity going on the lot with all the shows, you know, with Next Gen leading to DS9, leading to Voyager, leading to Enterprise. And like, when you look at what's going on now, there's, once again, so much activity going on in the world of Star Trek. So like, you know, Sid, what's your take on just how what goes around comes around and Star Trek is back and really...
It's great. I think it reinvented itself, you know, and it needed to. And I'm not sure how much they can squeeze out of it. But I still think I love the new show, and I'm sure that Picardo is going to be fantastic. On his vineyard, wherever that is, it's going to be pretty great. I'm still wondering what they're going to do with the show, what he's going to do. You know, your guess is as good as mine, but I think the future is rosy.
What about for you, Gates? I mean, you know, when Next Gen premiered, when Next Gen started in '87,
I was only like 12. But
yeah, yes. but you know, just to see sort of how it's like grown and evolved and continue to do that, especially now. Like, what's your take on just how you know you're part of something that's so big and it continues to grow?
Well, I think for sure, I was not at all aware of the power of Star Trek when I first started filming. I had no clue. I had never watched the original Star Trek until I actually was part of Next Gen, and then I started watching Star Trek. But it's been through meeting the fans at conventions that the power of the show and the significance of it, the impact, has really come home for me. I've met so many people who watched it when they were children, and they're now surgeons and nurses and, you know, geologists and biologists, and how fabulous is that? It's really profoundly moving and also inspiring because, as Kate said at the end, there's been so much that's gone on. It's been great to have strong role models for everybody, and to have a show that really is so open compared to many shows of that time, of the late 80s. And so that's very powerful to me. And just one last thing, and then I'll shut up. But
keep going.
I think that it's very amazing what's been happening with NASA and all of the medical things that are going on with the discoveries and the difficulties of long-term being out into space. And those are things that really, that our show so ties in with that it's really cool, you know, to sort of talk to some of the real people who worked on the Apollo, the original ones, and they're talking about, well, this is what the problem was, or the astronaut who's just been up there for 6 months, and they have problems because there's a genetic mutation, you know. It's pretty cool. Star Trek, it rocks.
Mark, you know, you're really sort of very active with the JPL, NASA, and you know the future of all that. You know, tying into what Gates was just talking about. You know, talk about how, you know, that maybe that grew out of your problem in Star Trek, or it was already a part of you and it's just grown even further.
Well, I was a biology major in college, so I have a lifelong passion for science. While I was on Voyager, I was approached by the two then surviving members, founders of something called the Planetary Society. Thank you. Let's hear it. Wouldn't it be cool if you could get together with your friends and, you know, all chip in and send a spaceship into space? Well, if you're a member of the Planetary Society, you just did that. Our citizen-funded spacecraft, $7 million, raised from 40,000 private donors, is now in upper Earth orbit. It is demonstrated and proven the capability of solar sailing for satellites. It is responding and doing maneuvers. It is tacking and sailing on the sun just as a sail ship sails on the wind. It's an amazing accomplishment. It was a vision that Carl Sagan shared with Johnny Carson on The Tonight Show in the late 80s with a model of it and said, this is a new kind of solar propulsion that's completely free and we can get there, and we finally did. So God bless you, Professor Sagan, and I'm really proud of the whole light sail.
Looking back with perspective, and I was talking with this about your co-stars from DS9 yesterday, is how, with all the streaming services now, it's all there. And you could just watch it like that. I mean, yeah, I could just break out the Blu-ray or the DVDs, but it's a lot easier just to go on Netflix or CBS All Access and boom, there it is. But like I'm always, especially with Netflix, it's so overwhelming, all the content that's there. I'm scrolling down, scrolling across, I'm scrolling down. Hell, I'm just gonna watch DS9, But the perspective of watching these shows, now that it's been time, you can look at it as a body of work. Each show does have its own identity. They are all fundamentally different. John, what
The show that killed the franchise.
Not where I was going, John, but having said that, but bringing up Enterprise, like, what do you see? How do you see the identity of Enterprise being different from the identity of Voyager, Next Gen, and DS9?
Oh, it's tricky. I mean, we were a little bit of the redheaded stepsister for a variety of reasons. UPN.
Careful on the redhead stepsister.
Well, from here you look kind of blonde. I'm sorry. Is that just me? No.
Gray baby.
Yeah, and rocking it. UPN itself as a network was going off the air. There were a lot of reasons why our show, I don't think, really caught on. I think as it progressed, I think we began to kind of find ourselves. But while I have a lot of affection for the show and a lot of affection for my castmates, I think there were issues with the show that had to do with network interference. It had to do with the reality that our show was on when 9/11 occurred, and I think some of the political slant that, to be very candid with you, was forced on the show, to my taste, moved us in a direction that I found problematic. I like to be very honest about this. There was an episode of the third season that I think condoned torture, which I objected to. In a lot of ways, I think our show had some problems.
But they all start.
So take that, gosh.
Well, hey, John,
Rebound from that.
I
waste my life watching baseball instead of putting small crafts into space. I'm a failure. I gotta run a magazine.
I hear there are doctors in the
I wanted to make sure I didn't interrupt anybody's answers. Hi, everybody. Thank you for letting me finish. I just wanted to say hello.
No, stay.
So happy to be here.
Stay, right? Well, okay. Welcome.
Thanks.
Hi, how are you?
Good, I'm good.
Okay, so we were talking about, my question was about how all the different shows have an identity and they're all separate they all stand alone. So, like, what do you see as, even though you're in the thick of it now, as it's evolving, like, what do you see now as the identity of Discovery?
Well, it's hard to say, right? I think part of what's great is when you can look back and say, what was our overarching theme? Because you've finished it, right? But I think if I'm just gonna put it out there, I think I would say that we're really exploring and expanding this idea of diversity, right? And really taking and looking at it. You know, and there's an overarching theme of feminism and empowerment, and really looking across differences about how we find common ground in order to solve our problems, which is probably something we should be talking about right now. So I mean, I'll leave it at that because I think we have 25 more seasons to go. So, maybe we'll look back and it will have been something else, but I think at the moment, I think we are reveling in this opportunity to show all of the spectrum of the human experience, whether that be LGBTQ or feminists or people of color. You know, I think we are really expanding and really looking head on at what it means to be a diverse culture and celebrating our differences and instead of being afraid of it. That's what I thought of right off the top of my head.
That was pretty good. That was pretty good. See, this is what makes this just a great panel. Like, so you refer, John, to Enterprise as, okay, his words, the redheaded stepchild, not mine. Okay, I love redheaded stepchildren. But for a while, people did sort of think of Deep Space Nine as, you know, middle child syndrome. But the thing is, and especially once we saw, just with the perspective of that wonderful documentary, What We Left Behind, was just this. Space Nine was the first of the Star Trek shows to, you know, for a show that was, you know, more or less stationary. It did go farther. It did take on, it was a riskier show. And Ira and all the producers and writers on that show really went with it. And it was so topical. And I was talking yesterday about how, you know, you have 2 episodes like Past Tense, which were way ahead of their time. You know, talk about how that show in particular.
I'm not the expert, but I will, you know, because I think Stephen Ira Bear, and the producers who were in charge of that show, Michael Piller, the late great Michael Piller, were riding that horse in a direction that we didn't really know, we just trusted. And they had a plan to do something that no other show had really done at that time, but shows were exploring, like X-Files and Buffy the Vampire Slayer, which was a long-form dramatic arc. Because every show was designed to go into a system of television, as you all know, where you start on some prime time area and then you repeat and repeat and repeat and repeat. It doesn't matter what order you show the shows in. It's called, they strip it, I think that's the technical term. Does it go into strip? And all the shows before that were designed as standalone stories, and Deep Space Nine certainly wasn't. It was a long form arc. And for that reason, it was very unpopular from the executive level. I think that may have had something to do with the fact that the press thought it was a problematic child, because it wasn't delivering the commercial promise that certainly my favorite show was The Next Generation. And that show, at the time, I just loved that show. And that certainly was delivering on that front. So I think there's probably a little bit of politics going on there. And also because it was a brave new frontier. And as I say, only shows like X-Files and Buffy, both of which came kind of at or after Deep Space Nine had already started this big world. But when you look at television history, sorry, I'm just going to bore you for one more second.
No, please.
But listening to experts on television history, they won't cite Deep Space Nine, they'll cite other shows. Because Deep Space Nine was Star Trek. And Star Trek was deeply uncool. I mean, what everybody in this room knows. But if you were sitting here in 1990, 1992, you would...
We were.
Yeah. You know, everybody in this room was the red-headed stepchild. And now look,
The world is copying you. The world is emulating you.
Yeah, if I can add to that, you know, I was talking to somebody on the way over in one of the vans today, that when I first was doing Star Trek and I met Rod Roddenberry, and he had a friend, Jules Urbach, who was this genius computer programmer, and he had done all these games for Sony, and he was like 17. But I went over to visit their place, and at that time, to be a nerd was to be in a dark room with floor to ceiling, all the way around the room, computer stuff. And it was like you were going into a cave, and it seemed strange if you weren't into it. And it was like, you know, oh God, they're nerds. Now everyone wants to be a nerd. We're happy to be nerds, you know? And it also is the same thing that happened like with the character of Wesley Crusher. In the beginning, the original Star Trek fans just were like, who is this kid who is saving the ship and blah, blah, blah. And of course, the mother had taught him everything, but that's, you know, that just happened. But I think what's incredible is now, all the people my age are always asking their kids how to fix their app and how to do this and you know, they're saving our ass every day with the you know, with their iPhones. So it kind of was prophetic, the way the show was, and I think that what I remember hearing some of the writers talking about with Deep Space Nine was that our characters always, we could have conflicts with them, we'd always be friendly. We'd never really go anywhere with that. We were team players. But they wanted to like explore what would it be like if it was the same thing. You're in a place that you have to be there for a long time, and you don't always get along quite so fabulously all the time. And that's what Star Trek is so cool about. They will take the risk to explore something, take an idea, let's see what happens. And that's why I thought it was really a fabulous experiment and a wonderful show.
Bob, you look like you got something to say.
Well, Voyager, of course, was the first Star Trek show with a female captain. I constantly point that out to Doctor Who fans who only got a female doctor last year. And to me, what's so wonderful about the Star Trek franchise and why it continues to reinvent itself and to stay fresh in the marketplace is how it takes something that you all love and you're all familiar with, and that same passion for adventure and going farther, and then it mixes the deck up. It adds a new element every time. My character was the first outsider doctor. Being in artificial intelligence, I got to deal with all of those entitlement stories that normally fell on Spock originally, and then Odo, and not on the medical character. So that they take they always, the way they reposition and re-examine issues they've examined before through a different prism is what keeps the show fresh. We thought we were going to have the first gay character on Voyager. There was whisperings and rumors, and we were all ready and hoping for it, and then it never quite happened, and I don't know why.
Dr. Phlox was the first bi character on Star Trek. No, I had husbands and wives, and I think people assumed that it was the traditional, actual pattern, but it wasn't. I had husbands and wives.
You were a bigamist.
Well, yes, but that's not what I'm really referring to right now. I'm talking about the fact that the first bi character was not appreciated was Dr. Phlox.
Go back to your magazine, John.
I think we should give him his appreciation right now.
Porthos also swung both ways.
A lot of sex going on.
There's a lot. This is a great panel.
Yeah, we only 4 years. I know. For all the sex, we only lasted 4 years. I don't understand.
But there were 4 great years. I mean, like, listen, the Enterprise especially. I mean, look, I know this has been said every.
I wasn't fishing.
Listen, John, the 4th season of Enterprise, was magnificent. I mean, that was the show. That was when it hit its stride. You know, for DS9, I think that like in season 3, same thing with Next Gen, same thing with, well, I like Voyager from the beginning, so you got that going. But when did you think, Sid, when did you start to feel that the dynamic, getting the feel for your character, getting the feel for everybody else, the relationships, like when, Bashir and O'Brien started to become buddies, like, when did you start to feel like, we got this? Like, I think we're good now. I think we're going in the right direction, and we got this.
One of the things about being on a TV series, and I'm not sure this is a universally, I'm not sure everybody on this panel would feel the same way, put it this way, is that when you are certainly an actor in my 20s, fairly naive I suppose, working on a TV series like Star Trek, which I had no idea what a big deal that was before I came to America. I was spending all my time just making friends with the cast. I was working out my interpersonal relationships, not really caring about my character. It seemed to me the most important thing was to just get along. And I let the writers deal with the character, and everything just came from that. And I think we, in Hollywood, sometimes are a little spoiled in terms of actors, because we turn up and we don't try hard enough to get on very well with each other. And the amount of bickering and the amount of fighting is just an insult to the people watching the show. So we worked really hard at just getting on. And I think that love, if it is love, certainly that attempt to love, ended up on the show and coming out the TV screen at people. And that's where we are.
But I feel like that's happening now at the start.
Yeah, I don't know what mystical thing happened in the casting rooms, over there, but somehow they have accumulated this group of people who just intrinsically and automatically felt fond for each other. And maybe it's because we're all in Toronto together and we have each other there, but we're very tight and we authentically like each other, and we each can't wait to work with each other. It's like we have our meetings with the writers, and it's like, who do you want to work with? And I'm like, all of them. And I'm happy to say that, I'm getting a lot more time with the rest of the cast this coming season. So.
Season 3, which is in production now. Okay, just putting that out there again. But you are all part of a Star Trek series that has been preceded by a Star Trek series. So in each way, you're all standing on the shoulders of giants.
Well, I think the fact that we get to do this serialized version of Star Trek is very much due to what happened on DS9 and the risks that they took in that storytelling format. So I'm grateful to them because I can't remember what, I think it was Alex Kurtzman, who said, the difference is, in telling a serialized story is that at the end of, or at the beginning of the next episode, we remember what happened, right? So it's a continuation. You don't forget about, what had just happened to you. And we very much take up most of episodes, moments after the last episode ended. So, it changes the way storytelling is.
And that's just the season 6 and 7 of DS9 were way ahead of their time. But Gates, when Next Gen started, to put it bluntly, was it scary to just sort of go in and be like, okay, here we go, we're gonna do a whole new Star Trek show, follow the original series?
Well, I didn't know what warp speed was at that time, but I think that when I spoke with Gene and he cast me, he really said, I want this show to be really different. I want it to be closer to what real life would be if you were up there. And I want there to be families, and I want there to be older people, and I don't want it just, only young and sexy people. And I think it obviously had to do also with his getting older and his having a son who was so smart and just seeing the world. We all are evolving all the time, and I think all the shows, just the way we are so sophisticated as watchers on Netflix. You know, like, can't you tell right away whether you're gonna, you know, what's gonna happen next? And when you don't know what's gonna happen next, you go, this is a good show. And I think that it's pretty amazing what they've done with all the different series. You know, it was a whole new world for us, really. We had to live, before they padded spacesuits, we were in that first season, we all looked pretty pathetic. You know, now people know you better either train or that all of us, by the time we were in like 4th season, we all looked like action figures, you know? And that was all new to us. You know, you were putting on something and you're like, wow, I look really good, you know? How did that happen? But,
First by fat guy.
Now you crush it. You can't crush it.
First and last.
But Bob, for you too. I mean, like you had to, you know, start something fresh following 3 other shows. I mean, did you find that like a scary thing or exhilarating?
I mean, there was a certain trepidation among the cast that I clearly remember before we went on the air. We were all wondering whether we would be embraced by the loyal fan base. I think probably all the shows go through that phase early on. But once you are embraced, it kind of knocks the wind out of you. You know, I likened it to premiering in a Star Trek show is like boarding a bus that's going 80 miles an hour. And it's a little shock to jump on, but once you're on, it's a very nice ride. I remember that Armin Shimmerman prepped our cast for what we should expect.
What did he say?
Well, he basically, he prepared us for the convention phenomenon. I remember when I got the job, my agent said, you got the part and you got your first 2 convention offers. So it does change, it changes your life, and it makes you, and Star Trek is shown all around the world, so it makes you a recognizable face around the world. It's a bit of a shock. But to me, the greatest dividend really has been, and Gates touched on this early on in one of her answers, we meet so many people who were inspired by Star Trek, and they look at us as part of that continuum of inspiration. And I have had the opportunity, you know, I've sat on stage with 5 men who walked on the moon. It's an extraordinary, for someone who loves science to begin with, it's an extraordinary opportunity that we have to meet the real engineers and explorers and scientists and mathematicians and all the people that make the space program happen, that make future medical devices, non-invasive medical devices, just like on Star Trek. We're going to have more and more apps that connect, you know, for home diagnosis, that connect to apps to your phone, and it's going to be scary, and there are going to be problems to work out about medical privacy with digital medicine and about all sorts of things. No one wants to scan themselves with a home tricorder and have it say, you have terminal cancer, you've got 20 minutes left. There has to be a way to mediate this information that people can get directly now because of the sophistication of the incredible technology that's going to become available to all of us. It's a great thing for emergencies, for a sick mom who, at 4 in the morning with a baby with 104-degree fever, to be able to get some immediate recommendation on how to lower your baby's fever at 4 in the morning when you can't get a doctor there. This is all a great blessing to society, but it does bring problems and other issues that we have to examine.
I mean, they do have, SpaceX has a medical tricorder that was developed, and they're you know, it's incredible. And there are so many, the robotics are phenomenal that are happening, absolutely phenomenal. I think we're going to find that there will be ways. It's going to be about dealing with the processing and you know, how are we going to deal with the stress if we are not connected. It's trying to keep our community, and the Star Trek community is a pretty amazing community, and I think that's one of the very positive things about it, because we do tie in, as you say, with NASA and the space program. And when I talk to astronauts, they also say how important we as characters were to them, because they needed to use their imagination when they're up in space. They're only doing their tasks, and they are isolated. It's important to really have ways to imagine things, and that's where you can, you know, literally correspond with an astronaut some of us have from the space station, and it's really awesome. And you're like, why are they talking to me? I've never been off, the ground. But it's because they're thinking they're Captain Picard. That's why. And it's pretty strong suggestion.
It's when you play a character that inspires real people to do real professions, like you have. I mean, it's got to be so like gratifying. Like you can't believe it.
The first phone call I got when I was cast on Discovery was from my ex-boyfriend, who called to tell me, I've told this to Gates, was to say, you're going to inspire people to become doctors, because he was inspired to become a doctor by Crusher. And it was the very first message. So, greetings from Dr. Rizzo.
Because we are actors here.
My problem is I played a lot of serial killers. So.
And I've inspired a lot of people to become holograms.
I've inspired a lot of people to be gay, but that has had nothing to do with the show. That was just my girl. Somewhere out there is a gay hologram serial killer. The best of Star Trek. Best panel ever.
Right, well, all the redheaded stepdaughters the stepchildren are all in my group, okay?
This panel has turned into quite a thing here, so let's start taking questions from you. You are first.
Thank you. Hi guys, my name is Morgan. It's a pleasure to meet those of you I haven't met yet. And so you guys all talked a lot about kind of the journeys of your characters, or kind of representative of the whole cast, how your shows were different from the other shows of your co-stars next to you. So I'm curious though about your own personal journeys. Just what about your show and the uniqueness of it and your personal journey through it has really stuck with you and resonated with you since you were on it?
Great question. Sid, let's start with you.
Thank you. You know what? I kind of touched on it in my last answer, which is about trying to get on, just trying to hang in there. And Los Angeles is a very difficult city to live in. It was particularly hard in the 90s. Actors were really stuff, people go through at Kmart during the sales and throw whatever they don't like over their shoulder and like rummage around for something interesting at Costco. And if you're not the perfect tomato, you are not getting chosen for that role. And not being the perfect tomato is always a problem for actors. And so I just was trying to hang on, and didn't really like being famous, and didn't really want anything to do with lots of people coming up to me and saying things. Partly because I didn't really understand what I was getting into as an actor. So I was just a 22-year-old to 28-year-old, 32-year-old kid who just got through. I know there are people here who are 25 and a 32-year-old kid. I was just basically hanging on. I don't have a philosophical understanding of what the show meant to me and how I developed as a person and journey. I was really just living day to day.
How about you, Gates?
I'm not trying to patronize, everybody, but I really think the thing that has come home to me the most has been that through the show, through my involvement with the show, not only have I developed a community with fellow actors, because we see each other outside of the conventions sometimes, but also that there's something really hopeful because I have met so many extraordinary fans who actually are people who are changing the world, who are doing things, who are full of hope and possibility. And honestly, I don't throw this out without meaning. It really gives me an inspiration. I am truly inspired by so many fans that I have met. People who've had 100 operations and come back from, Iraq, and people who have had 9 foster homes and they see my character as a mother figure because I was on the TV and they watched it together. It's more the journeys they have taken because I was just doing a job, but they were really living it, and it really moves me deeply, and so I really feel that gives me the greatest hope and inspiration, has just been meeting the people that I've met through the years. And I was the last one in my cast to do conventions because I was terrified of doing them. I was terrified of all of you. I was, and I was so wrong. And so it was a humbling and wonderful thing for me to learn. So thank you.
Well, probably like Billingsley, we were looking forward to doing conventions. We're both a lounge act waiting to happen. I'm going to limit my answer to actually the time I was on the show rather than the legacy after that. And the biggest gift for me as an actor on the show was that my part turned out to be so much more interesting than I ever thought it would be. My character, when I auditioned for the pilot, my character was described as colorless, humorless, a computer program of a doctor. Does that sound like a bucket of fun? And I took this job literally to put my 2 daughters through college, which worked out, by the way, so thank you all. But I had no idea that I had lucked into such a great part. There was no indication. I had 9 lines in the pilot. I just didn't know. And my biggest fear was because Brent Spiner, who was the artificial intelligence character in the show, 2 Star Treks before me, was so popular that I thought, oh great, they're going to hate me no matter what I do. So the fact that they conceived the character as a curmudgeon and as a crank, rather than sort of the way Brent had sort of been Pinocchio-like, and the fact that they gave me a whole different area to explore, and most importantly, I discovered I didn't have to obey any of the rules that every other Starfleet officer has to obey, because I was a new piece of technology, I was designed for a specific use, and if you use me off-label, as they say in medicine, if you use me for something else, there's no reason in the world I had to behave well. I could be arrogant, self-involved, cranky, cowardly, and I did it all. Characteristics, which people ask me what part of yourself is in the character. That's them.
John, I gotta get...
It's odd because mine is the opposite of that. I have played so many perverts and freaks and lunatics and serial killers, and to get to play somebody who was joyous and optimistic and positive about the world and with compassion, but coming from a very spiritual, not a religious, but a spiritual place, was an unusual thing for me in my career. And it meant a lot to me because it's much closer to my own character than the perverts are, frankly. I mean, I can find my inner pervert, don't get me wrong. But there was something about Star Trek Did something happen behind me?
Your hand.
Just appreciate you.
Oh, my hand was like, oh, Jesus Christ. Jesus Christ. No, I'm self-conscious. For me, that was one of the opportunities in my career to bring myself to a part in a way that I honestly can say I don't know that I've ever had a chance to do as much. So thank you for that.
When I think about Dr. Culber, I think about second chances. And I know a thing or two about second chances. I started out as a 19-year-old kid on my first series, and being an openly gay actor of color in 1995, 94, was not easy, right? So there weren't a lot of opportunities, and to have lived long enough to be afforded a second act.
I think that's what it is, yeah.
On this show, is overwhelming. And so when I think about Dr. Culber and his second chances and how he is tackling his new opportunity at life, it's something that I draw from. And so I'm grateful in so many ways.
My question's for Sid. I saw you in the miniseries Kennedy's After Camelot. And
Yeah.
I thought you were just brilliant as Aristotle Onassis.
Thank you.
And I wondered how you went through that, because you couldn't even recognize it was you. The process
Thank
of
you.
the makeup and the, I'm sure it was a padded suit or something, and then also how did you...
I put on the weight for the role, obviously. 250 pounds. I shed it right afterwards with my trainer.
And how did you go through the process of playing somebody who was real? I mean, a real person.
It's always lovely playing real people because you've got actually something to, a well to draw from. And you know you're going to offend family members all over the world. But there's something there, and you can actually have an opinion on that person. Aristotle Onassis was one of the most, I don't know many people in India know, apart from the fact that he was Jackie, thank you. I couldn't remember her name. There have been so many since then. But Jackie, she was nice. And Aristotle saved Jackie Onassis after the murder of her husband. And it was a financial transaction as much as anything. And he was a playboy, international playboy, who owned yachts and islands and all sorts of whatnot. He wasn't very charming. He had affairs with everybody in the world. So this was the kind of character that was really good fun to play for an actor. And I'm the kind of actor, and there are more than one of us on this particular bench who don't get to play a really varied number of roles. And we're limited by some of the things that we are born with. So I'll never get to play George Washington, for example, unless they prosthetic me up like they did for Aristotle Onassis. It was a real treat to go out of my comfort zone.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Oh,
I don't have so much question, but a comment. Here's why I love Star Trek. There are 5 Star Trek doctors on the stage. 2 white men, of course.
It's LeVar Burton.
But there are 2 men of color and a woman.
That's right, Lamar.
you have a question?
You're great.
Come on, Lamar. I gotta have a question.
A question?
Yeah.
Can anybody spot me at 20?
20 what? No fair.
Anything for you. This is Deirdre, and it was really her turn to ask a question, so... Oh, you work here.
Thank you, Lamar.
LeVar Burton.
Let's go to the episode symbiosis. Why did you disagree with Picardo about the alarm situation?
Wait, say that, I didn't get the last
Yes.
from symbiosis?
Yes, with the alarms.
But wait, what is the actual question?
Why did you disagree with Captain Picard?
Oh, I love to disagree with Captain Picard. You know, it's so much fun, and then we have great sex afterwards. I'm sorry. No, I'm sorry, I'm just kidding, children. No, I think it's because one of the things that was great about our relationship, I thought, was, and Gene wanted this. This was how he wrote the characters. He wanted Crusher to be the most human one on our ship, meaning the one who really cared about the humanist point of view. And her Hippocratic oath came over the Prime Directive. And whereas Captain Picard, it was about the Prime Directive, but hers was do no harm, And therefore, the symbiosis, where you had a planet that was filled with people who were addicted, and then you had the people controlling them were from another planet, and they were the ones who supplied, you know, the heroin, whatever. And so it was like we could have easily interfered. So it was a question of what do we do? And I think that's a really fascinating question. And one of the things I love about our show is that people could sit around, they wouldn't tell you which way was right, they just got you to think about, well, what would you do? You know, would you not help them? Would you disregard the prime directive? And I think the world is so complicated today, and I find that just getting people to think and not have to have a this is the right and this is wrong and we got to do this right now, but actually there's a lot of contradictions, and I'm ambivalent about a lot of things, and it's really hard but very fruitful to explore those ideas.
So glad I'm not calling the barber. So thank you for that. So I would attribute two things to my becoming a scientist. One was San Francisco Exploratorium, which is an amazing museum. And Star Trek, of course. And each of you were, every single time, my favorite characters. And though I loved plot development and character development, my favorite episodes were the ones that, in terms of the science fiction, it leaned in that ratio on the science side. And I'm wondering, in the new age of expanding ethical questions and scientific discoveries, what would you most like or think would be most interesting to see in the newest series to come about and have a conversation on? Like biotechnology, gene patents, anything.
Good luck with that one, Wilson.
This is why I'm not around.
Just delete me?
What can I say without spoiling?
Oh wait, Wilson, if you want to spoil anything.
Huh? Oh, you won't tell? Okay, sure. Hold on. Okay, I followed her out. And then they killed him. No, I'm just kidding. I don't know. That's a tough question.
I have something that I would like to throw out, not with reference to your show, but as an issue that I think is interesting to any of the privacy. Is the right to privacy salvageable in the modern world? Have we lost that because of all of the things that we have invented? Is it recoverable? And what would the cost be to recover?
This from a man who drops his pants on stage. He didn't mean that kind of process.
One goat!
I'm sorry, I did not mean to dismiss a very serious issue that he brought up. I simply meant to ridicule the man himself.
Thank you for that question. It's a great
Voted the cruelest doctor 7 years running in a significant internet poll.
Thank you all. Thanks for making that ready.
Okay, back here.
My question is for whichever of you would like to answer, but especially Bob, because this is something I think Voyager kind of did the best. As chief medical officers, each of your characters struggled with some pretty heavy ethical dilemmas from time to time. And was there ever a time where you personally disagreed with your character's final decision on an issue of the day?
Oh, I think so, yes. One that springs to mind right away because we spoke about it. We had a CBS-sponsored panel on medical ethics, which was really fascinating yesterday for all of us. I brought it up just as a sideline, but the episode of Tuvix, where we have a transporter accident. They didn't only have transporter accidents on Enterprise. We had one where Mr. Tuvok and Neelix were combined into a wholly new organism. Yes. Tuvix. Didn't I say Tuvix? Yes. Tuvix, sorry. And played by a wonderful actor, one of the best guest stars we had in all 7 years. And the end of the show took a strange turn. After sort of having a comic premise, it took a weird turn into an episode about right to life or euthanasia. Because in order to recapture our 2 original crew members, we had to get rid of this whole new organism that was a combination of the 2 of them. And my character actually argued against doing that. He would not, he thought it violated the Hippocratic Oath to take the life from this wholly new character, even if it had been formed by accident, and even if we couldn't keep him and get our 2 crew members back. So there was a time when I had to argue that point of view against Captain Janeway, and I found that was not my personal point of view. I guess I'm gonna share a secret with you. I thought it was kind of silly. I mean, I thought my point of view was silly. Of course we had to get our crew members back. But even if we don't agree with what they've written for us, we have to advocate very passionately for it. And that's why actors are really like lawyers. I'm sorry to say that.
I would say on the episode that introduced the Trill, the species, the Trill, I felt that in the end, when Dr. Crusher, who Gates McFadden was 8.5 months pregnant at the time, I couldn't even reach the guy's face to kiss him. But the guy who originally was the Trill, his body dies and then it gets put into Riker by me, and then I'm attracted to Riker, and then we have to put it into the body of a woman who is the host body. And at the end, Crusher says, she's not going to keep loving this person because it suddenly is a woman. Now that, I understood why it was in the script. I mean, I realized they thought it was pushing the limits, but personally, I think it would have been fascinating to take a character exactly like Dr. Crusher, who people knew had a thing with the captains and sort of, and actually, in the questioning, because I like the Trill, questioning of what is love, how much is physical, how much is experiential, how much is, just the emotional, all of that. I think that's such a great question for us to think about. And it would have been cool. That's the one that it would have been really, I know it would have shocked everybody, but it would have been very, very powerful. And I think it was a little less powerful because she, in the end, went, I'm just not ready for it. I understood why it was, but I think it would have, there was an opportunity missed, I think.
Deep Space Nine picked up on that. Picked up that ball and ran with it. My character committed an act of genocide and wiped out an entire species, which I was kind of bummed about. Frankly.
Well, just because, Drop Zone's about to play us off with hopefully a Beatles song.
Or Nirvana song.
But I just want to ask, to be here together, and for LeVar to point out what he pointed out was wonderful. Your surprise to come out here. So wait, what? You weren't supposed to be here, and now you're here. What happened?
All right, I'm going to get this all out of the way now. So my brother got married today. And I was at Toronto Airport waiting for my flight, and it was delayed an hour and a half, almost 2 hours. And so I was going to miss my connection in Iceland to get to Geneva, which is closer to in France where the wedding took place. And so there was no flight that could get me there in time. So I came to visit my other family.
Bob, John, ladies and gentlemen, give it up for the doctors!
And welcome is Heather Ferris, and I am your unofficial host for STLB 2019. And I am joined by Fred and Rocky. And what did you guys think of the panel? Did you like that panel?
It was one of the coolest panels. They should have done this a long time ago.
Yeah.
Get all these doctors together, or actors who play doctors together.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It was definitely a lot of fun, yeah. So, I guess we finally had the answer to the question of, is there a doctor in the house?
Yes, there's multiple.
There's a lot.
I'm just glad nothing happened where we actually needed a doctor.
That's true.
Right?
Very true.
How about Dr. Flock being the first
That
guy
dude.
character?
Well,
He was funny.
he's the funniest dude on the
He
planet.
is.
He's a goofball,
Yeah.
but he's also a very good actor.
Yeah.
Yeah, he went out of his way to...
It was quite hilarious.
To try to, campaign for a spot on the Picardo series, remember that?
Yeah.
Yeah, totally.
That was funny.
But yeah, he brought up the fact that Flox is bi, like very.
Yeah, multiple times.
Yeah, he is. That was the coolest. I mean, that was a cool character. I really dug Flox. And when they smile, the smiles are just wonderfully over huge. I don't remember those shots. Those are great.
And they were also saying too, Picardo was saying that even if we don't agree with it, we still have to advocate for it passionately like lawyers. So I think that we're talking about actors and everything and acting, and even though the actors don't agree with it, they're like lawyers and they have to advocate for it
you might not like what's on the page, but that's your job to be that thing, to do that thing. And, if you got to be an actor doing that scene, you're doing that scene.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, you can raise your objection to the writer, the editor, but ultimately, if that's what they want in the story, then like you said, that's
what it is. That's what it is.
It's your job to act the scene.
Yeah.
Yeah, you do that. And then it was also funny too that they were talking about how on Deep Space Nine, Armin prepared the rest of the cast for the extras. So they'd never been to conventions before or anything, and Armin is like, okay, this is how we're going to prepare you guys for the conventions. Here's how we're going to prepare you guys for the people and everything at the conventions. I thought that was interesting.
It's interesting stuff. Yeah, it's like, here's what it's going to be like.
Yeah. Right?
Yeah.
Like,
because you
just
never
so
know. It's like, you hear about it, but if you haven't been there, you have no idea.
Right.
Yeah.
Like, don't freak out. With, if they start fangirling, don't freak out.
If they start asking you what your favorite book is, don't freak out.
Yeah.
Make sure you give it some thought.
Right? If you turn around and you get hugged in the hallway, it's okay. or this is even better. If you're in the bathroom, don't start having a conversation.
That's very important. Yeah.
Not the optimal setting for
Not the optimal setting, definitely not. Was there anything else that you guys wanted to talk about the panel before we get going?
I'm trying to remember, did Crusher say something? Crusher,
Yeah, actually, so it was the Discovery Doctor.
Okay, yes.
But he was saying how Dr. Crusher was the one that inspired him, And now that he's a doctor, he's inspiring future doctors. So it keeps,
going from one generation to another.
Exactly. Yeah, that was a great panel. Thank you guys so much for watching. Thank you for watching our panel. Thank you for watching our commentary. And we hope to see you again on the next panel. Join us. Resistance is futile. Bye.